The nature of games development means that developers are usually pushing up against a deadline which is set by a publisher. That means the game they put out on release day has hopefully minor issues that can be ironed out in a patch. Sometimes, though, developers also end up doing something more drastic, like removing huge features the game launched with for one reason or another. That can be a good thing or a bad thing depending on the nature of the removal and the feature we're talking about. I'm Jess from WhatCulture, and here are 10 video games that removed important features after release. Number 10. 17 Songs. Grand Theft Auto San Andreas. The Grand Theft Auto franchise is known for, among other things, its fantastic soundtracks, comprised of existing popular music, with GTA San Andreas arguably touting one of the series' finest compilations to date. With the soundtrack topped by the likes of Cypress Hill, NWA, Rage Against the Machine, Tupac, Public Enemy, Faith No More, it goes on, there was basically something for everybody. That was until the PC version of San Andreas was updated on its 10th anniversary, which unceremoniously removed 17 songs from the game's library, including Rage Against the Machine's Killing in the Name and NWA's Express Yourself, two iconic tracks San Andreas is most closely associated with. And to rub salt in the wound, existing saves wouldn't work on this updated version of the game. It appears that the songs were removed by Rockstar due to expired licensing agreements, that old chestnut. And such is the double-edged sword of every developer's ability to update games whenever they want. Number 9. Cheats. Hitman Blood Money. When Hitman Blood Money first released, players were easily able to access the game's cheat console and activate a bevy of handy cheat codes. These included infinite health, all items and ammo, teleportation, and the ability to don random disguises, as well as level skip and a bunch of other things. Yet roughly a month after launch, IO Interactive released the 1.2 patch. Now this fixed a bunch of minor issues in the game, but what the patch notes were less forthcoming about was that the update also disabled the cheat console from working, and so in turn removed the very cheats from the game that they seemingly intentionally included. Sure, you can argue that this console was only ever meant to be accessed by the game's developers for QA purposes, but back in the halcyon days of 2006, console command cheat codes were still very common, even expected in PC games. Thankfully, modders soon discovered a way to reactivate the cheats by editing one of the game's source files and undoing the patch's work, and we bless modders for yet another day. Number 8. Talent trees. World of Warcraft. For the first 8 years of its life, World of Warcraft had a talent tree system where players would gain talent points each time they leveled up, which they could then spend at will across the various talent trees. Though talent trees were changed and expanded throughout the years with each expansion, they were removed from the game outright with 2012's Mists of Pandaria, which instead replaced said trees with tiered abilities that were automatically awarded every 15 levels. The removal of traditional talent trees unsurprisingly proved divisive with fans, many of whom felt that Blizzard had dumbed down the talent system by removing a layer of choice and experimentation. Well, over a decade later, it's a design choice that remains polarizing among the fandom, though Blizzard did eventually throw fans a bone in 2022 with the Dragonflight expansion, which reverted back to a version of the talent tree. Number 7. 4v4 Chaos. Rocket League. Rocket League is one of the most successful multiplayer sports titles of the past decade, and much of its popularity can be attributed to how easy it is to pick up and play. Players are free to take part in matches counting up to 8 players, 1v1, 2v2, 3v3, and the utterly manic 4v4 Chaos mode. However, in late 2023, developer Psyonix removed 4v4 from the main menu, instead making it a limited time mode rotated in and out of the game every so often. Naturally, this was infuriating for everyone who loved the sheer uncut insanity of a crowded 8-player field, which personally I love in Smash and maybe you do too, especially those who habitually formed a team with a group of 3 friends. Now, players have to schedule their Rocket League squad time around when the 4v4 Chaos is in the rotation, which, as you can imagine, especially if you've experienced it, sucks. It isn't really clear why Psyonix made this decision, but it unsurprisingly proved tremendously unpopular with the player base. Number 6. The Auction House. Diablo 3. Diablo 3 was largely well received by critics, but general players had some serious misgivings about Blizzard's decision to include 2 auction houses in the game. And just saying auction house has a shiver run down my spine, so let's go through this one quickly. One auction house allowed players to purchase game items with gold they'd acquired during gameplay, and then another was added a month after release, which allowed players to buy wares with real money. Blizzard came under fire from their own fan base for creating an in-game economy built on pay-to-win mechanics, in turn diluting the sense of satisfaction that comes with obtaining weapons and items organically. Though Blizzard claimed that they added the auction houses to Diablo 3 to combat illicit item trading outside of the game, the overwhelming consensus was that the auction houses were net negative to the overall experience. Ultimately, Blizzard's own director even went on to agree that the auction houses were a misguided concept, and they were eventually shut down in March of 2014, less than 2 years after the game's launch. It's only at this point that Diablo 3 really came into its own, and general player reception on the game enjoyed a significant turnaround, also aided by some much-needed balancing and loot-based gameplay fixes. While the auction houses were clearly a major facet of Diablo 3 that a bunch of business people thought was a good idea, it's painfully clear in retrospect that they should never have been included, and fans were definitely not going to put up with it. Thankfully, Blizzard evidently learned their lesson as Diablo 4 launched without any such nonsense. Number 5. Mortal Kombat characters. NBA Jam Tournament Edition. When NBA Jam Tournament Edition first released in arcades in 1994, it came loaded with a hilariously unhinged hidden feature, which was secret Mortal Kombat characters. With the use of cheat codes, players could bring Scorpion, Sub-Zero, Raiden, and Reptile onto the court to shoot some hoops, and they even had their own bespoke basketball outfits. However, later revisions of the game's arcade cabinet removed the Mortal Kombat characters, and sadly, they never made it into the eventual home release either. While Midway had every right to include the Mortal Kombat characters as they were also the publisher of the hit fighting game franchise, it ultimately came down to a missive from the NBA. The NBA allegedly weren't remotely amused to see murderous characters from the Mortal Kombat franchise associated with their brand and playing ball with real-life basketball players. So lame. And so to keep the NBA happy and avoid any potential legal action, Midway had to acquiesce, ensuring the Mortal Kombat characters could only be accessed by those willing to emulate the earlier arcade releases. Number 4. Peter Dinklage's voice acting. Destiny. When Destiny launched in 2014, Bungie couldn't stop talking up the involvement of the great Peter Dinklage, who'd lent his voice to the robot AI companion Ghost, or Dinklebot as he was semi-affectionately known as in the game's early days. Considering that Dinklage was on Game of Thrones, the world's biggest TV show at the time, who could blame them for not shutting up about it? Yet when Destiny was released, many expressed disappointment with Dinklage's wooden, emotion-devoid performance. Some calling it lazy, phoned-in work on Dinklage's part, while others argued that he perfectly captured the flattened affect of a robot. Either way, in 2015, Bungie announced that veteran voice actor Nolan North would be taking over the role of Ghost for all future Destiny DLC, and that North would also be re-recording all of Ghost's original lines, effectively removing Dinklage's work from the game entirely. Despite the polarizing response to Dinklage's performance, Bungie revealed that the decision to remove his dialogue was primarily a logistical one. Dinklage's limited availability as an in-demand Hollywood star made it difficult to schedule new recording sessions at short notice, so coming from the world of voice acting as he did, Nolan seemed like a better fit to portray the character in a games-as-a-service property like Destiny. Number 3. Global Chat. Divinity Original Sin. In the earlier days of online multiplayer RPGs, it was far more common for global chat to exist, a window where players could type messages which could be seen by anyone else playing at the same time. Oh my god, explaining global chat has made me feel 1,000 years old. Anyway, this was true in 2014's Divinity Original Sin. When it launched in early access, players could quickly type messages and ask for hints from anyone currently playing around the world. But when the game launched proper, developer Larian Studios swiftly decided to remove the feature due to the overabundance of profanity and insults they observed during the first few days of release. And if you've ever been on the internet, that probably makes sense. They reasoned that the chat created a negative and unwelcoming atmosphere for players. performance, and given that it wasn't a feature that was vital to the game's operation, they opted to shut it down. The logic is definitely sound there, though for anyone who loves being able to periodically socialize with random players during an epic RPG, it was definitely a shame. But I guess this is why we can't have nice things. Number 2, forced stealth, Star Wars Outlaws. Though last year's Star Wars Outlaws received broadly positive reviews from critics, one of its less praised aspects was the inclusion of mandatory stealth sequences. Given that many players simply don't enjoy stealth mechanics, period, not to mention mandatory ones, unavoidable stealth gameplay is not the most organic thing to include in a AAA Star Wars action-adventure game. Some even suggested that this directly contributed to Outlaws' less than stellar sales. Some 3 months after release, developer Massive Entertainment decided to release a patch which removed almost all forced stealth sequences, meaning that being spotted by an enemy no longer triggers a fail state and sends players back to the last checkpoint. While such a drastic rejigging of certain gameplay sections surely risked creating a cascade of issues, it was nevertheless a considerable relief for players who just rather not have their Star Wars game crashed by frustrating stealth sequences, allowing them to just start blasting instead. It's still stealth as long as no one's alive to know you were there. Number 1, Knuckles' Infinite Jump, Sonic Boom: Rise of Lyric. We're really only being slightly sarcastic when we say that the ability to beat the Sonic series' worst game in less than an hour is most certainly a feature, not a bug, and a damn important one at that. Within a day of the critically mauled platformer's release, players discovered a glitch which allowed Knuckles the Echidna to perform an infinite jump. Pausing the game while Knuckles is mid-jump causes the jump motion to reset, allowing players to keep jumping, reach areas they shouldn't be able to, and skip large portions of the gameplay. Hilariously, despite making global headlines in games media, this glitch remained in the game for over 2 months before Sega finally removed it with a patch. Given there was a general sentiment of disappointment at best and anger at worst surrounding Rise of Lyric's release, a bunch of people were left further crestfallen that a means of shortening the dreadful experience had been deleted.